Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to today's Partner Web Conference, Learn How to Build Microsoft Teams Apps. My name is Leslie and I'm going to be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your PC speakers only. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. Participation in the meeting today indicates your consent to being included in the meeting recording. Attendees may access the web conference recording via a link that will be delivered by email within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel. It is located on the right-hand side of your screen. You may need to open it with the Q&A icon there. We do have presenters standing by to answer your questions throughout the presentation. Now, a little bit more about this presentation. This web conference has been brought to you by the Microsoft 365 Partner Marketing Team. This presentation will be 45 to 50 minutes in length, and our presenter will then switch over to Q&A and start addressing your questions. We'd like to thank you in advance for your patience while we work through those. If you find your question was not answered or would like more follow-up, you can also head on over to the Microsoft 365 Partner Yammer group and post your question there. We will share that Yammer link in the Q&A panel momentarily. Now on to the presentation. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Rochelle Fleming, Director, Product Marketing, and Aurobindo Chattopadhyay, Architect. Rochelle, the floor is all yours.
Great, thanks Leslie. Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending the webinar today, which is focused on how to build Microsoft Teams apps. We're excited to have you here, and thank you for taking the time to be here. As we know, your schedule is very busy, so thanks for the investment in today's session. For the next 45 minutes or so, we would like to walk you through these areas. First is to get an overview of Teams and the opportunity that you have to build on the Teams platform. Next will be details on how to build Teams apps. So whether you're brand new in the development area or familiar with developing on the Teams platform, you'll get the latest details on how you can successfully develop on Teams. There will be 5 steps that Aurobindo will walk through in detail, starting from developing scenarios, designing experiences, building the app, publishing it to make it available to customers, and then governance of the app for customers. You'll learn about technical resources and next steps to start your journey on building an app. And finally, we will close with a special announcement about a new program that we are excited to make available to partners like yourself who are going to hopefully complete development of Teams apps over the next few months. So to start out, let's take a look at today's workplace environment. As we know today, collaboration is a critical piece for our customers and all of us on this webinar. It's a part of our day-to-day work life, and it's important that collaboration evolves as needed in order for us to be even more productive and efficient than we are today. So let's take a look at what some key leaders are saying about how they're approaching work within their organization and just overall performance. Different leaders from around the world, from different industries were surveyed, and here's what they said. 65% of leaders agree that moving from hierarchical to a team-based work environment is critical for their success, but only 7% say they are ready to do so. Web-based collaboration solutions have been implemented by 45% of leaders, and 39% of leaders stated that workplace collaboration is one of the top challenges facing their organization. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that leaders obviously are aware of the importance of collaboration performance and potentially need some guidance on how best to approach these areas. So the Teams app solutions that you will develop can help these orgs really be more successful and address their challenges with how they can work and better communicate within their organization. So let's just give a brief overview of what Teams is. Teams really is the hub for teamwork, which brings together the many facets of communication and collaboration that our customers and all of us experience throughout the day. And these activities may include chat conversations that you have internally with colleagues or even externally with partners and vendors, meetings like one we're on now, and calls that take place throughout your day, files that we can create together and have the ability to work on the same version. And then finally, different apps, specifically Teams apps that businesses rely on, which is the focus of this webinar. There has been significant customer momentum that we're so excited about that has happened with Teams. There's over 500,000 organizations today that are using Teams, with 91 Fortune 100 companies using the product. Over 50 languages are supported with Teams, and there's over 200 customers who have 10,000 users or more on Teams. And that really leads us to look at just the opportunity as it relates to all of you on the phone. And when we look at that customer base, it's significant. Teams is where customers are getting their work done, and they're spending many hours of their workday collaborating on files, chats, and meetings right within Teams. On top of that, the reach is great with 180 million Office 365 monthly users. This is really a great foundation for potential users of your app. The next area that can be leveraged is the product innovation of Microsoft 365 for your app experience. If you're building for Microsoft Teams, you can make your app available both on a mobile or desktop client without having to worry about the infrastructure to run Microsoft Teams. And you can involve your development by first creating a tab or connector and then building upon that experience. Teams is the fastest growing business app in Microsoft history. And so that's a great place to start as you're building your app on this Teams platform. And there is great visibility that you can get when you publish this app through AppSource or Microsoft Azure Marketplace. And Arbindo will go through those details about the publication process later in the call. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Arbindo, who's our architect, who's going to walk through the 5 steps on how you can build your Teams app.
Thank you, Rochelle. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Rochelle. Hello, everyone. I think Rochelle did a great job helping us understand the value of Teams as a platform, especially for app developers. What I'm going to do in this section is we are going to go through the process of building a Teams app. We'll start from identifying a scenario specifically for Teams app, right to publishing that app into the store. And then we'll see how your customers govern the app that you have published and made available to them. Throughout each of these stages, we will look at best practices and design guidance based on learnings that we have gathered as we develop Microsoft Teams as a product and service for our customers. Given the time constraint we have for this presentation is a summary, and we will be following it up with a much more detailed guidance in form of a guide that will be coming in next couple of weeks. With that, let's get started. Let's start with understanding Teams platform extensibility. These are the components within Teams that you as an app developer can customize for your app. Tabs, these are the canvas that serves as the user interface for your app. So today, if you're using Teams, you are familiar with tabs that point to a Word, Excel, or a PowerPoint file. Similarly, you can create your own custom app tab for your app that points to your application, where you are bringing data from your application right into the context of Microsoft Teams. And what it does is it helps your users to engage in a conversation about your application right within the context of teamwork. Message actions, as the name suggests, it helps users perform an action on a conversation. So today, when you look at a conversation within Teams, you have options such as saving the conversation, editing, or deleting a conversation. You as an app developer can customize these message actions and add your own action into the dropdown. And one of the app actions could really be triggering a workflow, for instance. So if you have a conversation and you have developed an app for a help desk support group, you can have a message action that takes that conversation and creates a service ticket, for instance. The next one are bots. These are very popular with our customers. And what it really does is it allows users to engage in a natural language conversation with your application. You can build a simple bot that helps you with Q&A, or a much more advanced bot that performs action on behalf of a user. The next one is the task modules. It allows you to build a pop-up experience within Microsoft Teams. So think about a scenario where you want to gather additional information from end user. So instead of redirecting the user to a different application in a web browser or taking them outside Microsoft Teams, you can develop this pop-up experience right within Microsoft Teams. One of the common scenario here with task module is we have seen app developers building forms to gather additional information. Messaging extension, this is one of my favorite customization because it allows users to bring in information from outside Teams into Microsoft Teams. So think about a scenario where you have all these service desk tickets and your help desk group wants to have some conversation around it. So instead of copying the service desk ticket or pasting a link into Teams, you can use message extension to pull that information and display it into Teams in a much more rich and interactive user interface using adaptive cards. And then you have notifications, which is a great way to get users' attention. It allows your app to post a message into Teams activity feed, which is very similar to an inbox in Outlook. It helps you get attention of a user. So think about a scenario where a service desk ticket was escalated for some reason. So using this activity feed notification, you can add post a message into a supervisor's activity feed to get their attention about this escalation. As we go through this process, we will look into each one of this into much more detail, but just wanted to make sure we understand all the platform customization opportunities you have as an app developer. So let's look at the journey of building a Teams app. This is very similar to building app in any other platform. What makes Teams app really unique and different is the fact that the app experience itself is embedded into the aspect of teamwork. So you always start with a scenario, right? What is the scenario that you want to achieve with the app? What are the challenges? What is the end user problem statement? But one of the things you want to consider when you're building a Teams app is that the scenario promotes teamwork. It helps teams to get things done efficiently and quickly. Once we have the scenario, we develop the user experience for that app. How will end user interact with this app on their mobile phones as well as on the desktop? Now, this is where we will look at some of the best practices and lessons learned based on our experience as we developed Microsoft Teams. In the third stage, we will do a deep dive into building the app itself. This is where we will look at 3 distinct phases for building your app. And after we build the app, we will look at how you package it and how you distribute it, how you test it internally and distribute it to the App Store and finally to your customers. And the last step here is governing the app. This is really not a step for an app developer. This is where your customer comes in. They install or they deploy your app in their environment. And they have controls that we have put together to govern the app within their environment. We are including this in the journey because we think it is important for you as an app developer to understand what controls your customers have in their disposal to govern the app. With that, let's get started with the first step of a teamwork scenario. Now, this is the stage where you do not want to think about technology or a solution. You only want to focus on your end users and their journey. Who are your end users? Start there. Name your heroes. Document how they feel today before the app, and document how you want them to feel after you have an app for them. Tell their story. One of the best practices here is to document day in the life. How do they go about every day getting things done, working with the team members, accomplishing what they need to accomplish? What are the challenges they feel every day? And when you have this day in the life, create another day in the life with the future state, with your app in place. Do a compare and contrast. Does it promote teamwork? Does it help with their productivity? And last but not the least, create an elevator pitch. This is your vision statement for your app. This is what will guide you, your team members, and any new members who join your team. What is the guiding principle? What is the North Star? It will also help you communicate the value of your app with your stakeholders. Let's look at some of the decision criteria as you work through your scenarios. The first one, if you really look at it, today, our users, they use multiple applications to get things done. They are using Excel, they are using some ERP systems, they are using emails, SharePoint or whatever. But one thing is common, as they are getting their things done, they are communicating with people internal to their organization as well as external. And when they are communicating outside these applications. All these applications are siloed, and the communication is it does not align or is not attached to this application context. It is usually happening in an email. So when you're starting here, think whether your app is promoting teamwork, whether it is getting the application and the conversation in one single central place. Second point to consider is the frequency of usage of your app. Your app will benefit from a Teams app if it is used frequently rather than just one-time event. The third factor to consider is how many people are going to use your app. More people use your app, the relevancy of your app increases. And last but not the least, what is the ROI for your application? Does it increase efficiency, and does it decrease the time it takes for your team to get things done? That is your return on investment. And it is very early on that you need to make sure you have a clear ROI for your app. Because if you cannot justify yourself, it will be hard to justify others about the value that your app brings. So let's look at some of the sample scenarios for your apps. The first one here is a custom tab, which brings in data, in this case, work items from system that is external to Teams into Teams. And what it does, it allows all the team members to align on work that needs to get done. And it also helps them to engage in a conversation within the context of this application. The second example here is a custom messaging extension. Like I mentioned before, messaging extension allows user to bring in information from outside team as a conversation into Teams. In this sample scenario, we have sales executives who are using this messaging extension to pull in a sales report that is outside Teams in some dashboard or some BI storage. And what's happening here is once you get that information into Teams, you are bringing in, you're enabling the engagement with your team members on that particular sales report. The third example here is an app for a corporate communication team, where the team is reviewing all the social media posts, and they are also submitting a new post based on approval right inside Teams. And the fourth example here is an example of a personal app. Now this is a unique different kind of app within Teams that is available only to an individual user. And it is different from a Teams context is because this is the app that is showing information that is relevant to a particular user. So think about the first scenario where we have a custom tab that is showing all the work items for a particular team. In a personal app, what you do is you show the work items specific to a particular user, but you are aggregating all the work items from multiple teams here. So it's a very individualized, personalized experience for a user within Teams. Now that you have scenarios and you looked at some samples, let's go through the design experiences for your app. As tempting as it might be to ship your app as a minimum viable product or MVP, we recommend you strive for MLP, minimum lovable product. What you want to do is you want to delight your users first time and every time they are using your app. They want to come back every day to use your app, and they want to make sure everyone knows how awesome your app is. And that is only possible when you think about minimum lovable product. Do you love it when you're using it, right? Start from there. The second most common mistake we have seen is in the documentation. This is something that is ignored at a very early stage. And what I'm referring here is the short and the long description of your app that shows up in the App Store. You want to make sure you are grabbing your customers' attention when they are browsing hundreds of apps in the App Store. Why is your app unique? What is the differentiator? And how it will delight your users. One of the, again, a common mistake we have seen here is that a lot of app developers talk about their organization, how awesome their company is, which is great, but not what you want to highlight when your users are browsing the App Store. The third recommendation here is to find a professional designer for your app's icon. Now, this is the brand of your app. This is the image that shows up all across the Teams experience. You want to make sure you hire a professional designer to design your brand. And last but not the least, hire a professional writer as well. What we have seen is that consistent style, good grammar, and correct spelling instills confidence in your app. So once we have the basics out of our way, let's talk about the design process itself. One of the things that we have seen quite often here is that teams, they spend a lot of time in the design tool instead of the design process. You do not want to spend a lot of time perfecting your wireframe, right? Perfecting the user experience. What you want is something that is interactive, something that you can iterate faster. So use whatever tool you feel comfortable with, but just make sure it is not slowing you down. Make it more interactive so that you bring in your end users in this process when you're designing the experience. Get early feedback. It is all about your users. Ask them questions. Do not assume answers. More time you spend in this process with your end users, less time you will spend in writing code. And one last thing here is document the key beats. Now, these are some unique experiences within your app that excite your end users. One example could be a bot that is proactively reaching out to end user based on an external event, right? For instance, let's say there is a service ticket that was created with a higher priority, and it is reaching out to a supervisor proactively. Now, that is something that is valued a lot by your end user, for instance. Document that key bit, but also make sure you are not annoying your end users with a lot of proactive messaging. So there is a balance that you want to strike here, and you want to give your control to end users and let them decide what is important for them. So that's the reason the last point we have here is backtrack. Once you document those key bits, challenge yourself to see if that really makes sense. Ask the end users, would they prioritize this feature? Make it all about your end users when you're designing your experience. We have much more detailed guidance about designing tabs, bots, cards, apps in our Microsoft Docs documentation. We have provided link to each one of those. I would highly encourage all of you to take a look at it. The last link here is a video by our very senior program manager who has designed Microsoft Teams user experience, Michael Forney. There's a link here and the video is available on YouTube. Michael really goes into the art and science of designing the experience. So highly recommend you take some time to watch this video. Now that we have scenario, we have designed your application, let's go through the building the app process itself. So as you start your process of building the app, we would like you to structure your effort into 3 phases. All right. We do not want to shoot for the moon the first time. Start with quick wins. Start with the surfacing your application data into Teams. Right. Once you do that, you will enable your team members to engage in conversation about your application. Once your data is within Teams, enable users to interact with that application and data. Add rich interactions to make it more relevant to your end users. And third phase is where you're really making your app smarter. This is where you're letting your app reach out proactively to end users. Let's go through each one of this step in detail. The first phase here is surfacing your data in Teams. And one of the ways you can do that is by building a custom tab. We talked about tab early on. It is the canvas that serves as a user interface for your app. Users can pin it within a channel, which is within a team. That is called a Teams custom tab. And then you have a personal custom tab. That is the tab that users can pin in their one-to-one chat. So when you're building a tab, you really have 2 options of what kind of tab you want to build. One of our recommendations is to start with a custom tab and then move into a personal tab. The development process is very similar. What your tab does is different, right? In personal tab, you're making it really about the individual end user, whereas in the Teams tab, it is all about the teams in the Teams context. So how do you build a tab? There are 2 ways to build your custom tab. One is to use the Teams SDK, and the second option is to leverage SharePoint Framework Web Part. With version 1.8, when you develop a SharePoint Framework Web Part, you can use that web part as is into Microsoft Teams as a tab without changing a single line of code. When you compile your SharePoint Framework web part, it creates a team package that you can deploy within Teams and have that web part show up as a custom tab. The properties that you define within the SharePoint Framework web part becomes the settings within your custom tab within Teams. And there are several benefits of using this approach. From an end user perspective, you are reaching out to end users across multiple endpoints, both in SharePoint and in Teams. From an IT perspective, you are simplifying the governance because you deploy it once, you're using it in multiple applications. And from you as an application developer perspective, this is how you are reusing your code. You're writing it once and you're using it in multiple applications. So to help us, go through this build process, we have put together a sample app. This is a sample Teams app called Contoso HR hiring app. And what it does is it automates the hiring process across multiple teams. So if you look at a typical hiring process in an organization, it starts with opening a job position, to shortlisting candidate, to scheduling interviews, to having the interview feedback, and then finally offering a job to the candidate. In this process, there are multiple people who are involved at different stages. So what we have done is we have taken this scenario as a typical teamwork scenario, and we have built an end-to-end application. And we have provided the entire source code that is available to you on GitHub. I will be providing you with links to this sample. Along with that, we have put together a demo that you can either show it to your customers or to your internal teams. As we go through this presentation, we will be using examples from this application to understand the various custom capabilities within Teams. Here is an example of a custom tab. This was built using SharePoint framework. So this works across SharePoint and Teams. So what you're seeing here is a custom tab that is showing list of open positions and candidates who have applied for this open position. You will see this is a custom tab that is in the Teams context, which is why this is available to all the members in the HR Contoso team. The second capability here is to add rich interaction. So once you have your Teams tab, your users are interacting, having conversation around it. The second phase is to build a bot that users can engage in a natural language interaction. They can ask questions, they can get things done using the bot. To build a bot, just like tabs, you can leverage SharePoint Framework WebPod. For bots, you can use bot framework that is available as part of Azure services. And Teams becomes one additional channel that supports your bot. So again, you're reusing your bot across multiple endpoints. One of the cool things about bots in Teams is that you can leverage adaptive cards. So what you see here in the screenshot is the response that bot provides when you ask this bot, what are my active job positions? It is showing you a list of active job positions that you have created. But at the same time, there are two buttons here to view details and to add a new job posting. So this is the rich interaction that bots provide within Teams that you can take advantage of. Here is an example of messaging extension. Again, taking the HR hiring app as a sample scenario, this messaging extension is used by internal employees to look up candidates and positions from Teams. So what you're seeing here is instead of redirecting user to a different application that is outside Teams, users are using messaging extension to query information and bring that information into Teams. This is an example of a task module. As I mentioned earlier, it provides a pop-up experience, and one of the most common use case here is to gather information. You can also use task modules to, let's say, embed a YouTube video, for instance, or a video from a Microsoft stream. But in this case, for HR hiring app, we are using task module to collect additional information about a new job posting. Again, you have a very common theme across all these examples, and that theme is to keep the user within the context of teamwork, right? You are avoiding application switching by bringing the application experience within Microsoft Teams. So we walked through the first two phases where you started with surfacing data into Teams, then you added a rich interaction. In this stage, you are making your app much more smarter by reaching out to the end user based on external events. And there are really three functionality that you can leverage here. The first one is the proactive messaging using bots. And one example here is, let's say, again, taking the HR hiring app as an example, let's say a candidate was scheduled for an interview and you are the interviewee, the bot will reach out to you with a message saying the candidate interview has been scheduled, these are the dates, and it will ask you whether you want to download the resume or whether you want to block your calendar, right? This is a very useful scenario where not only the application is reaching out, but it is also allowing user to perform additional action based on that notification. Second is the activity feed. Like I mentioned, this is really critical to get users' attention in case of some event where you want the user to be notified. And taking again the HR hiring app example, let's say a candidate has accepted the job offer. You can just post a notification to users' activity feed saying the candidate has accepted the job offer, and then user can click on that activity feed and view the candidate details, for example. The third one are the connectors. Now, what connectors does is it allows your application to push notification into Teams as conversations, right? So today you have connectors such as Bing connectors, Twitter connectors that users can subscribe to within Teams. So Twitter connector, for example, helps user to keep a track on a particular hashtag that is relevant to them or particular user handle that they want to follow within Teams. Similarly, you can build your own connector for your application that users can subscribe to. And one example here from an HR hiring app perspective could be a user who is interested to keep a tab on all the open positions across all the teams. So you can build a connector for your HR hiring app that sends conversation whenever a new job posting is created by any team members in your organization. This is an example of Office 365 connector for HR hiring app. And what you're seeing here is a conversation that was pushed from the app as soon as the candidate stage changed from applied to screening. And one of the recommendations here is you want to make sure you give control to your end user on what they want to subscribe to. What we have seen is if you are posting a lot of information, you're really losing your end user's interest and they may just remove the connector. So give them the control on what status or what changes they want to subscribe to. Okay, now that we looked at building the app itself, let's look at how you take this app and make it available to your customers. So the first thing to perform here is to create an app package. So let's say you're using SharePoint Framework Web Part, like we talked about, or you're using Teams SDK. The tools that you have in your disposal, such as Visual Studio, will create a Teams package for you. This package is nothing but a zip file, and it has 3 files within this zip file. The first one is the app manifest, and 2 other files are the icons that are used in Teams. The most important thing here is the app manifest. So app manifest is nothing but a JSON file. which describes your application. It has information such as what is the unique app ID, what is the name, what are the descriptions of your app, and it also has pointers to your application. For instance, if you're hosting your tab in Azure, this app manifest will have link to your Azure website where the tab is hosted. Second, if you are using bot framework, the app manifest will have ID of the bot framework that you want to use in your teams as a bot. And all this JSON schema that defines the app manifest is available in GitHub. And every time we make a revision, we make sure we are updating the GitHub so you can always reference to any changes that happens to this manifest schema. So this is my favorite tool within Microsoft Teams. It is called Microsoft Teams App Studio. This is built as an app within Teams. So today, if you're using Teams, go to the App Store, search for App Studio. You will get to this Teams App Studio tool. And what it does, it helps you build your app manifest using a user interface. So you really do not have to open the JSON file in Visual Studio or a Notepad or your favorite development tool. You can use the App Studio to fill in all this information. It is also handy because it helps you define your tabs, your bots, your messaging connectors from this user experience. So if you're already signed in to Teams, it will grab all the bots that you already have deployed in the bot framework and help you configure the bots within your Teams app manifest. And the third functionality that this App Studio does is it helps you test your application within your development environment. So if you have made any mistake in the JSON file, or there are some special characters that don't work, you will catch it in the App Studio itself. And then once you're ready, you can deploy your app from the App Studio into Teams, and you can test it out. Okay, so once your testing is done, once you're ready with your app, you want to submit it to the App Store. We are moving from Seller Dashboard to Partner Center for this experience. And one of the requirements here is for you to have a Microsoft Developer account for Office Store Developer Program. So that is the first thing you want to do. And there is a series of validation checks and review process that happens to make sure your app is ready for the App Store. And there is a pretty detailed guidance in the link that you see on this slide. You can click on it and you can go through the process and best practices on what you need to make sure you have in place before you submit it for review. So how do you publish your app? The first thing you do is you publish your app within your team. This is where you are testing your application, right? And you use something called custom side loading of your application. And when you do that, you do not have to deploy or publish your app into a team store. You can directly take the app package, you can upload it to a particular team and do the testing. It's very useful wherein you can give this app package to specific end users so that they can do the testing before you publish your app into the store. Once you're satisfied with the testing, you publish your app into the store. This is where you follow the guidance, you go through the review and the validation checks, and you use the Partner Center to submit your app for your publishing it to the store. Once you do that, this is where your customers, they are browsing the App Store, they look at your app, and if they want, they can purchase the app. And once they do that, this app does not move. The copy of this app is then deployed to the customer's tenant. Here is a summary on this publishing process. Number one, the Teams app package is nothing but a zip file. You can you can create the app manifest in your tool of choice. It is a JSON file, but we highly recommend you use App Studio. It simplifies development of this app manifest as well as helps you with the testing and configuration. The app schema is hosted in GitHub. So if you want to know more detail about a particular attribute, you can always head on to the GitHub and see the revisions that we make for each and every version. And the last is to submit your app. We should have mentioned Partner Center. It's a Partner Center now, where you can have your Office Developer Program account and you submit your app through the process. Step 5 is governing your app. Now, this is not a step that you as an app developer will be performing. This is what your customers will be performing after they purchase your app from the store. We want to make sure you are aware of all the controls that your customers have in their disposal, so that you understand how your app lands into the end users, and if it does not, what could be some of the issues from a governance standpoint. So from customers' IT, they really have 3 policies that helps them govern a Teams app. The first one is the app permission policy and the org-wide settings. So using organization-wide settings, a customer can block all third-party apps, or they can allow a specific set of apps. Then there is an app permission policy that helps restrict set of apps to specific set of users. So for example, if you have this HR hiring app and the customer wants this app to be available only to HR users, they can provide this application permission policy wherein the app cannot be installed if a user is not part of the HR group. This is one. The second one is the side loading policies. Now, this is helpful when someone is testing the application. And by having the side loading policy, users who are enabled for side loading will be able to upload an app package directly into Teams without going through the IT or without going through the tenant Teams app catalog. So what we have seen is customers, they block side loading across all the users, and they just provide side loading options to developers or to certain end users who are performing or helping with the development process. The third one is really exciting. It's something that I'm really fond of. This is the app setup policies. And this is really what is helping you as an app developer to promote your app to your end users. So using app setup policies, your app can be pushed to end users without them trying to reach out to your app. And here is an example here. So let's say you have built this HR hiring app and you want everyone in the HR organization to use your app. But guess what? Nobody knows that this app exists in the app catalog. So using the app setup policies, the IT can pin this app to all the users who belong to the HR group. So whenever they start their teams, they will see this app here in the left-hand bar of the Teams. So this is an awesome policy capability that you can talk to with your customers on how your app can be promoted to the end users. So this is where your app is reaching out to the end users. Okay, just to summarize, we went through 5 key steps here, starting with the teamwork scenario. Always think about scenario, your end users, their story, and whether your app is promoting your teamwork. Second, design your app experience. And the key takeaway there is to include your end users when you are in the design process. Iterate faster, visualize, make changes so that you're spending less time developing your code. Third, build your app. Think about 3 phases. Start with surfacing your app, then add rich interactions, and then make your app smarter by reaching out to end users. Fourth, publish your app. Use our tools such as App Studio to make your life easier when you're testing and deploying your app. And fifth is really governance that your customers perform, but we are making sure you understand all the controls that customers have in their disposal. Now, for the key resources here, the first one is the sample source code. When you click on this link, you will get redirected to GitHub, where you have the entire source code from custom tabs to bots to messaging extensions that you can take a look at, you can install in your environment, and you can play around with it. We also have a demo of the same application. We also have a self-paced lab here. One of the, then you have the platform resources such as development, documentation, and the blogs. The key item here is the platform training videos. This link goes to a YouTube channel where we have list of videos recorded by our engineering team. It goes from 200 to 400 level on developing custom solutions for Microsoft Teams. One thing we did not talk about here is the authentication and identity aspect. I mean, Teams uses OAuth. It can integrate with any identity that supports the protocol and standards. We would like you to integrate with Azure AD as a single sign-on. There are a lot of content here in the link that will help you understand the integration. Last but not the least, join the community, give us feedback, tell us what is working, what else we can do to help you, and be in touch with us. With that, I hand it over to Rochelle for the exciting announcement that she has. Rochelle?
Great, thanks so much, Arvindo. Thanks for going through all of those great details and providing such prescriptive guidance. I think that's going to be so helpful as folks start to work through the details on kicking off scenarios and the experiences and so forth. Hopefully you can see the screen here. So as Arvindo said, we have an exciting announcement that we wanted to make this morning about a new program available to partners like yourself who have developed or are developing Teams apps. And it is called the Microsoft Teams App Development Scholarship 2020 program. And by hitting certain requirements, this program allows you to get advanced development training from our engineering and architects at an event that will be held in Greece in 2020. So how it works is that there are requirements for ISVs and system integrators to meet between July 1st of 2019 through March 31st of 2020. ISVs need to register at least 5 customers with a minimum of 1,000 monthly active users for an app that is published in AppSource or the Teams and the Teams App Store. And the app also will have Azure Active Directory single sign-on. And then SIs need to conduct a minimum of 3 customer envisioning workshops and also deploy at least 1 custom Teams solution on a customer tenant with at least 100 monthly active users. There are details on the scholarship program site that is linked here, and you will receive a follow-up with this deck, a follow-up email with this deck, so you can access that link. Only the first 100 partners to meet the program requirements are eligible to attend this training, and when that happens, you can send a max of 2 employees from your organization. So if you're interested in meeting these program requirements and potentially heading to Greece to get this training with our architects and engineering team, definitely register for this program. It's a great place to be able to engage with our team for a few days, for us to learn from you, for you to learn from us, and allowing you to kind of hit this milestone of the app development process over the next few months. So really excited about that program, and hopefully you'll consider registering for it. So as we close, there's a few next steps to consider. First is to sign up for the Yammer form, to be engaged as a collective team here, to share feedback, answer questions, and so forth. Consider registering for the scholarship program, which was just mentioned. And on the week of December 2nd, there is going to be a Build Teams app guidebook published that will have much of the details and even more of what Arbindo went through today, to really walk you through all of the steps of the thinking of the scenarios all the way to the governance of the app with customers. So that'll be a great resource that you can use to help you along the journey. And last is to start building your app today. Teams is definitely ready for you. It's a great platform that we have a great customer base for, that is really in need of apps that you all can create. So we'd encourage you to start or continue the process today so customers can experience all the productivity benefits that your app can offer. So these are just some next steps to consider over the next few days as you're thinking about how to proceed with building your Teams app. So with that, Leslie, I'm going to hand it back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Rochelle. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment and bring your attention to the link in the question manager there. We'd greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to access that link. It's a link to a short survey for this web conference, and we ask that you provide us with your feedback by clicking on that link and answering just a few short questions. Any final words, Arbindo or Rochelle, before I go ahead and wrap this up?
No, not at this time. Thank you for everyone who has taken the time for this webinar.
Wonderful, thank you. That's going to conclude today's web conference. The recording and a copy of the presentation deck from today's session will be available within 5 business days. Please look for an email from Worldwide Learning in the coming days with details on how to access those. I'd like to extend a great big thank you to our presenters today. Thank you very much, Rochelle and Arbindo. And thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us. Have a great rest of your day.